Welcome to the webinar, The Art of Interviewing. The goal for today's webinar is to help you prepare for your next job interview by talking about things to do before, things to bring, what to wear, and we'll talk about the day of the interview and things to do afterwards. We'll first start off by giving you a basic idea of what an interview is. There's a technical definition here on the slide, but to summarize, an interview is when the employer gets the chance to speak with you on a more in-depth way as a potential employee for their organization. This is done through questions employers will ask and seeing how your personality is by your body language and appearance and the way you answer the questions. Interviews can be in person, on the phone, or online through a virtual platform and may involve one interviewer or a panel. We'll talk a little bit about each type of interview later on in this webinar. Here we have a short checklist of things you can do before an interview. You want to think about your work attire, and we'll go into details about what that might look like in a little bit. Be sure your clothes are pressed, stain-free, and your shoes are clean. Nails are kept clean and hair is neat. Wear little or no perfume or cologne and remove extra jewelry and excessive makeup. You want to make a good impression, just like with your resume, and impressions count even more now since the employer will get to see you. If you're not sure where your interview is, get the address and directions and go to the site a couple days before. That way you have an idea of how long it will take accounting for any traffic. If you're taking public transportation, like the bus or metro, take a test ride to the location so you know the route. Allow yourself the extra 30-minute cushion time in case there are any delays since you want to get there about 10 to 15 minutes early so you have time to get centered and in some cases have time to get the questions for the interview beforehand. Lastly, the simplest thing on this checklist that people often forget is to get a good night's rest and eat breakfast. You don't want to go into an interview where you're sleep deprived and you're hungry. You might be a little nervous the morning of the interview and eating might be hard, so maybe just something small to hold you over. In preparation for the interview, you can research the company or organization. Know their website, mission, values, and goals. So one way you can find out more about the company is by looking in the About section on the company website, which usually has information on their history, beliefs, and goals. It really does set you apart from another candidate knowing this kind of information beforehand because it shows the employer that you actually took the time to research the organization, you're interested in what the organization represents, and you see yourself in the future of the organization. Know the names of everyone you're meeting and how to pronounce them, since this can be another good way to further make a good first impression. Know your accomplishments and future goals, so be prepared and confident to speak on your skills that you do possess. You might get a question like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Or what is your greatest accomplishment? So take some time to jot down some of your accomplishments and goals to have on hand to respond if you get asked. Know the details of the position. Know the ins and outs of what the position is requiring you to do, the responsibilities, and basic qualifications. Practice the interview process with someone to answer difficult questions. We'll go over some sample interview questions that will help you answer some of those trickier questions that might come up later on. It's always good to do your own research online for commonly asked questions and practice answering them with someone so you can see how you would respond and get feedback. You can also interview someone else to get their perspective on how they would answer the questions, and that could help you get an idea of how to change up your own answer. Prepare examples and practice in front of a mirror. When you practice in front of a mirror, you can see how your body language is. That way you can see how you look and what you need to change up. Basically, the more you practice, the easier it'll feel answering the questions. What do you want to bring to an interview? First, always have some form of identification in case there's security requirements to enter the building. Secondly, bring a notepad and pen so you can take a few notes during the interview. You can ask the interviewer if it's okay to take some notes, and it can be useful to show that you're actively listening and engaged in the conversation. Additionally, it can help you jot down some important details about the job so you can refer back later on to send the interviewer a personalized thank you email. Make sure to have a couple of clean copies of your resume. Even though you might have already submitted your resume, having copies ready to be given out shows that you're prepared. Have references on a separate document since you might get asked at the end of your interview, so it's best to be prepared to hand it to the employer. Always have a list of questions to ask the interviewer to show your further interest in the organization. We'll have some examples of questions toward the end of the webinar of what kinds of questions you could ask. Other things you can bring are work samples or any documents that's requested by the employer, business cards if you have them, just in case you meet that one employer who might ask for one, and a portfolio or folder to keep all your resume copies and other paperwork together. What do you not want to bring to an interview? Things like coffee, drinks, any food, chewing gum in your mouth. It's all distracting to what you're there to do, which is make an impression on the employer, so you want to make sure to not have these things when you come into the room. Water is okay, but just kind of keep it out of sight. For cell phones, leave it in the car or have it turned off before you enter the room. Other electronic devices like laptops, tablets, and iPads, bring it at your own discretion, but it's best to leave them at home. And the last thing on this list is do not bring anyone with you to the interview. That includes friends, family, and pets. Things you can do during an interview is go alone, arrive early, and make a good first impression. Address the interviewer by name to be respectful and formal. Wait until you're asked to be seated and maintain good eye contact when you walk in the room and as you're answering the questions. An important thing to remember is to take time to think about your answers to the interview questions. Take a breather before you answer if you need to gather your thoughts. Give examples of your skills and work experience that not only relate to the question, but highlight your qualifications and the readiness to do the job duties of the position. Have a positive attitude and don't be afraid to ask questions you don't understand to be clarified. Lastly, you can ask when you may hear back to learn about the hiring decision. It's recommended after you send your thank you letter to the interviewer to wait at least 2 weeks before calling to inquire about the job if you haven't heard back after that time has passed. Things that you don't want to do during an interview is wear sweatpants, tight clothing, or any other unprofessional clothing. One important thing is don't apologize for your lack of experience. Many people often say sorry for not having experience in something and never say what they do have experience in. For instance, if the employer asks you, do you have experience using Zoom for video conferencing and telecommunication? What you can say is, I do not have experience in Zoom, but in my last job we did use Microsoft Teams and the features are very compatible with video and chat capabilities for conferences and communication, so I'll have no problem learning how to use Zoom. So give an answer that's honest by saying you don't have experience in a certain skill and emphasizing what you do have skills in. You want to focus more on positive things about yourself that you do have skills in rather than the negatives. Don't ask about salary or days off in the first interview, discuss personal problems, other jobs you didn't get, or criticize anyone you might have worked for or worked with. Do not provide false information, beg for the job, or assume you will get the job. Don't have a negative attitude, use slang words or one-word answers. For example, if you're asked, have you ever been in a situation where you had to resolve a conflict? Don't just say yes, you want to say yes and explain what the conflict was and how you resolved it. And lastly, don't ramble when you're giving your answers, just answer the questions as completely and as clearly as possible. In thinking about your professional references, you want to have at least 3 to 5 people, and in some cases, organizations may ask you to clarify if the references are personal or professional. The more recent your references are, the better, going back no more than 5 years, because the further you go back, the harder it might be for your reference to speak on your behalf unless you really worked a lot together. They could be mentors, past supervisors, professors, even coworkers. Anyone that can talk about your personality, work ethic, work experience, skills, and accomplishments. Always remember to ask permission to use them as a reference and contact your references so they know when they can expect to be contacted. You can even talk to your references and ask them to focus only on specific things about you that will help emphasize your skills and qualifications to the employer. Sometimes you may hear references and recommendations being used as the same thing, but references are different than recommendations. References can be given over the phone or in writing. It's more general in nature where the person gives the employer details about how they know you and a general overview of your characteristics, knowledge, and skills. Employers may also ask what work you did together or verify and confirm some basic information about you. A recommendation is a person who knows you well to evaluate your abilities and writing on behalf of you to support your application for a career goal, specific scholarship, program, or job opportunity. This type of letter is addressed to someone specific and is stronger than a reference because the person is actually recommending you for something by talking about your accomplishments and skills that make you a strong choice. In terms of exchanging contact information, make sure your contact information is up to date with your phone number and email. Be careful that your voicemail and email address are both professional for calls or communication from an employer. In regard to the employer, get their business card or names and contact information of those you interviewed with so that you can follow up with the thank you notes later on. In the second portion of this webinar, we'll talk about some sample interview questions and what to wear for your interview work attire. The first interview question that you may get asked is, what are your strengths? Don't worry about how the question is worded. This question may not be asked as directly as it's stated on this slide, but somehow, some way, this question may be asked, or it may not be asked at all, so just keep that in mind. The key to talking about your strengths is to use it as your chance to demonstrate that you're the best fit for the role, the team, and the company, and start off really strong impressing the interviewer. What are they really asking you? The interviewer is giving you an opportunity to highlight your skills and experience, so you want to have at least 3 strengths with examples prepared. Employers like to hear solid, detailed examples of where and how you apply your strengths in your previous jobs. For example, you can say, I have excellent organizational skills. In my previous job as an executive assistant, I created new processes for scheduling meetings, planned monthly agendas, and prepared for event appearances. This resulted in everyone in the company to understand how things worked, how long they would take, and it helped alleviate stress and set expectations. I'm excited to bring the same approach to this role as an operations manager to improve system processes for this organization. So it's important to notice in this example, it was said what was done in the previous job, how the strength was used, what the outcome was, and how the strength benefited the company. These are the 4 essential things employers want to know when they're asking you to talk about your strengths. The words created and resulted that are bolded are both action words that help employers know how you used your skill and what benefit did your skill bring to the previous company you were with. The last sentence is bolded to emphasize that you want to remember to relate what you talk about with your strength back to the position and how it will benefit the current organization you're applying to. This next question, what are your weaknesses, is a little tough because not only is it hard to admit your faults, but you don't want to hurt your chances of getting hired. What are they really asking you with this question? The interviewer wants to know whether you're qualified to do the job, and they're looking for how you've been able to learn new tasks and handle new challenges. It's a great chance to show how you notice any personal setbacks and how you took initiative to overcome those setbacks. Do not say, I don't have any weaknesses, or give examples like, I am a perfectionist and I'm such a hard worker, so I don't have any weaknesses. These kinds of statements come off as arrogant and dishonest, which aren't good qualities that will get you the job. If you can be honest and say a weakness you notice about yourself but took steps to improve on it, you'll show employers you care about your work ethic and the job as a whole. The bottom line is you want to always emphasize the skills and requirements you do bring as an employee, not only the ones that you don't. An example you can say is, one weakness I notice about myself is it's difficult for me to ask for help. I consider myself an independent worker, and even though it has never impacted my work, I've learned that it's more beneficial both for me and the organization to reach out when I don't understand how to do something. I work on this daily, and in my past position, I've been able to produce more high quality work, and the duties of the job were performed more efficiently as a result of getting help from those around me. So notice how with this statement it demonstrates that you're hardworking, a team player, and you're willing to go the extra mile to improve on a weakness that doesn't directly impact the work you perform at the organization. You want to pick a weakness that you may have noticed about yourself that you can speak on, how you're improving it, how you're changing it, or how you use it to your advantage at your previous position. Now we'll look at what to wear for the day of the interview. You may have heard this phrase, dress for success. This applies to any situation you might be in. For instance, when you step out of the house and dress your best, you feel your best, and that feeling can come across in your body language and tone of voice. Also, in a situation where you're in the elevator with the interviewer themselves, and maybe even the CEO of the organization. In those couple of seconds, you'll never know who's there to see you. If you're wearing inappropriate clothing, it may bias them to not consider you, even though you may have all the right skills and qualifications they're looking for. The idea is, if you're going to dress like that on the day of the interview, the employer won't have any assurance that you'll dress professionally on the job. Dressing for an interview can be summed up in two words: businesslike and conservative. Anything that draws attention to what you're wearing and away from what you have to say should not be worn to a job interview. There's a lot of information on this slide about what men can wear for the interview, so just keep in mind some of these examples if you do want to go out and improve your wardrobe. You can go all out and wear a suit like a navy blue or black one. Other suit colors are acceptable too, just not ones that are too colorful or bright like orange or yellow. You can go for the simple route of long sleeve dress shirt that's a white or solid color like blue or gray, a tie that's ideally solid color, and you want to coordinate the color of the tie with your shirt and suit, and avoid bow ties. For socks, wear navy, black, or dark gray that's about over the calf length. You can match the color of your socks with the color of your pants and wear black or wingtip shoes. For women, you can wear a more conservative look with a full suit that's navy colored, or other color suits may be acceptable too, just not ones that are too colorful or with a lot of distracting patterns. You can also go for a simple blouse that's solid color with a skirt that should fall at or just below the knee, with stockings and shoes that are black, navy, or brown that match the suit with basic pumps or low heels. You want to avoid shoes with multiple colors and open toes. Lastly, for accessories, they can either enhance the professional look or make it too much. So be mindful if you do use any jewelry, stick with small earrings, no large hoops, and bracelets that don't dangle. Remember that you don't want to bring too much attention to the clothing you're wearing. Rather, you want that attention to be focused on how you answer the questions being asked. So all the clothing information that was just went over, you don't have to leave this webinar and immediately go get. Just think about what you have in your closet that closely matches these descriptions and you'll be okay. Here's an example of what both men and women's work attire might look like. Even though it's a stock photo, generally you get the idea that it's going for that simple professional look that doesn't make you stand out too much, but makes you stand out just enough from the next person that might only be wearing jeans and a shirt. Looking professional on the day of the interview gives off nonverbal cues that you know how to look presentable, especially if the position involves going to a lot of business meetings with directors and CEOs. Your body language are your nonverbal cues that you give off, which make a difference in the impression you give to employers. Some helpful hints for things you can do with your body language is always make eye contact, practice good posture, don't slouch or use your arm to prop yourself up. Try not to fidget, shift a lot, or check the time. Doing these things might give off the impression that you're uninterested or rather be somewhere else than the interview. And lastly, use a firm handshake when you enter and leave the room. Again, this one would be ideal before the pandemic, so an alternative to this might be a nod, a smile with verbal acknowledgement. With your speaking voice, which is your verbal cue, it can tell employers a lot about yourself, especially your mood. So sound warm and upbeat, never sound as if you're in a bad mood. Think about using good diction and do your best to pronounce your words correctly and as clearly as possible. Don't use slang words, rather, you want to use complete words. Make sure to speak at a normal tempo or slightly slower than usual. You want to make sure you're speaking slow enough to answer all parts of the question, say everything you want to say, and also slow enough for the interviewers to write down your answers. And lastly, speak at a pleasant volume and reasonable pitch level. Some common things to be mindful of during the interview is greet with a firm handshake, make eye contact, and smile. Be calm and take a deep breath before you start to help ease some nerves. You also want to listen carefully to the questions and if needed, ask clarification to the questions. Don't interrupt the interviewer. Think before you respond and respond as clearly and concisely as possible. If you find yourself so nervous you blank out and unable to answer the question that the interviewer just asked you, it's okay to ask if you can come back to that question because you need more time to think about how to answer it. If you answer when you're nervous or you don't have anything to say, you won't be able to say what you want to say and may not even answer the question as directly as you want. So, by asking to come back to the question, it gives you time to think about the question, and maybe in answering other questions, it'll jog your memory on how to answer the previous question. Just remember, everyone in that room is human and everyone has been on the other side of the desk where you're sitting as the person being interviewed. So there's a level of understanding that people often forget. So don't rush yourself to answer any questions you're unsure of. Give yourself some grace and time and think before you answer the questions. In closing the interview, this is your chance to ask any questions you have for the employer. It could be any questions related to the duties and requirements, office structure, organizational culture, promotion, or mission and vision of the organization. Some questions you can ask are: how would you describe a typical work week? What are the biggest challenges of this job? During your time with this organization, what do you find is the most rewarding part about the work that you do? What is the organization's vision or mission for the next 5 years? And then, after you've asked all your questions and they've given their answer, you want to thank the interviewer by name. Take some time to verbally acknowledge that you're grateful for the opportunity for the interview and you look forward to hearing back about the hiring decision. And lastly, you want to mail or email thank you notes to the interviewer. In this next section, we'll talk about two other types of interviews you might have. The first one are phone interviews, which are conducted just like in-person interviews. The only difference is employers can't see you. They're used by recruiters as a tool for screening candidates to make sure they meet the minimum requirements before they advance on to speaking with the hiring manager. Be thoughtful about your tone and language to provide a clear, helpful answer since you can't rely on body language when you're speaking to the interviewer. Unlike in-person interviews, you do have the ability to refer back to your notes, so take some time to review sample phone interview questions and prepare some answers. If you do write down some notes, remember to sound natural instead of sounding like you're reading directly from a page. Before you take the phone call for the interview, turn call waiting off so your call isn't interrupted. Make sure you're in an area with good phone reception and, if you need it, internet access to quickly reference something online. If you're in your home, clear the room, any kids or pets, remove them from the room, turn off any music, the TV, and close the door. Just make sure you're in a space that's quiet, away from any noise, whether that's in your house or out in public. Keep your resume in clear view anywhere that's easy for you to access so you can refer to it if you need to. Have a short checklist of your accomplishments available to review and speak on. Lastly, have a pen and paper handy for any note taking you might need to do during the phone interview. Just like with the in-person interview, don't eat, drink, or chew gum, especially since you're on the phone and the sound will definitely be unpleasant to hear. Imagine you're in an interview room and smile. Even if they can't see it, smiling will project a positive image to the listener and will change the tone of your voice. If you're nervous, speak slowly and enunciate your words. Take your time, and it's perfectly acceptable to take a moment or two to collect your thoughts. Give short answers, about less than 2 minutes. You want to remember the goal of the phone interview is for you to get an in-person interview, so it's a really good time to impress the recruiter and keep your answers as straightforward as possible. After your phone interview is done, you can ask some questions and thank the interviewer. Let them know that you look forward to hearing back from them soon about the next steps in the hiring process. Here we have some sample phone questions that commonly come up and how you might answer them. You might get a question like, "Tell me about yourself." This is just a simple way for the interviewer to learn more about you. Talk about your brief work history, showing how each project and job helped prepare you for the job you're applying to. Use this time to explain your relevant experience, what you're currently doing, and why it makes you qualified. While you can include a few personal details about yourself, you should focus on more professional qualifications and accomplishments. A second common question might be, "Why are you applying for this position?" Or, "What about this job interests you?" This question tells employers whether you're serious and have a genuine interest in pursuing the position. Just be sincere. Use details listed in the job description, details about the company, or something about the job that aligns with your career goals. Think of an answer other than you're interested in the position because it pays well or you need the money. Generally, everyone has that desire, so think of something else that might set you apart from another candidate. The next question could be, what experience do you have in, for instance, Microsoft Outlook? With this question, if you don't have experience with a software program, remember to think about something similar you've used or done and speak on that. Keep in mind to make any discussion of your experience relevant to the job and the specific skills you want to bring to executing it well. Lastly, another question that recruiters could ask is, what are your salary expectations? They may ask this question early in the hiring process to see if the salary you expect aligns with what they have budgeted for the role. To answer this question, you can say, I'm pretty flexible and open, however, I would like to learn more about the company, position, and benefits package. Never say a certain amount or any numbers, always indicate that you are open to negotiation. The last kind of interview that we'll talk about today is the virtual interview. For safety measures, many companies and organizations who are actively hiring now are opting for virtual interactions to take the place of in person job interviews. So, what is a virtual interview? If you've never experienced one before, a virtual interview is an interview that takes place remotely in your home or public space, often using technology like video conferencing or other online communication platforms. They're often conducted the same way as face to face and phone interviews, with some slight adjustments and things to take into consideration. One video platform that might be used is Zoom, and having a virtual interview would include things like having your camera on, wearing professional clothing, and being able to use your mic to interact with the other person. Listed here on this slide are some other potential audio and video platforms that employers might be using to host the interviews, so it's good to research a little bit about each of them to be prepared to use them when you need to. When you're thinking about the virtual interview, you should treat your virtual video interview like an actual in person interview. One thing you'll need to do differently is get familiar with the platform and technology. Download the application on your computer or phone beforehand and test out the camera and sound quality. Get ready and set up your devices 15 minutes before the scheduled interview time. Try out the meeting that the employer sent you and make sure to know about any passwords that are required to enter the meeting. So make sure to have all the information available. Everything should already be set up from the employer for you to access the link, and if the employer hasn't sent the information, don't hesitate to ask for it. Like with the phone interview, you want to set up in a distraction free area that's quiet away from noise. Since virtual interviews will likely use the video option, you want to have a professional, appropriate background. Your attire should be the same as an in person interview, one that's professional, conservative, and businesslike. You also want to prepare answers to commonly asked questions and prepare questions to ask the employers. You want to make sure you're speaking slowly and clearly to answer the questions. Be mindful to use professional body language like sitting in a chair with straight posture and eye contact, since the employer can see you. Don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you need it, and always be authentic and honest when answering the questions being asked. And lastly, just like with the in person interview and phone interview, thank the interviewer and that you're looking forward to hearing from them about the hiring process and send a thank you email. In this last section, we'll look at how to write a thank you note to send to the interviewer. When you write a thank you note after an interview, think of it as your last chance to tell the employer why you're the best candidate for the job. Although you can mail the note, it's best to email within 24 hours of the interview. When you email, you can connect with the employer much more quickly and influence their decision before they complete the hiring process. For the greeting, be safe and stick to the basics like good morning or good afternoon and enter the name of the interviewer. Start with Miss or Mr., then their last name. In the case that your interviewer was a woman and you don't know if she's married, use MS. In the first paragraph, you want to thank the interviewer for meeting with you. Express your enthusiasm about gaining employment in the company. In the second paragraph, you want to emphasize your qualifications and interest in the position. Include personal skills you forgot to mention during the interview. Emphasize a skill or accomplishment that you have that would make you an asset as an employee. In the closing paragraph, briefly thank the interviewer again for their consideration. Express confidence in your ability to perform well within your organization. And lastly, state that you look forward to hearing from the interviewer. Here we have an example of what a thank you note would look like. The note starts off by addressing the interviewer by name with Dear Miss Janet Jones. Then in the first paragraph, Jane Doe thanks the interviewer for taking time out of their day to conduct the interview. Jane also included what she liked about being at the interview. In the second paragraph, Jane emphasizes why she's the best person for the job. She said, I believe my background in pitching and interviewing and my ability to manage an editorial calendar will be an asset for tracking down great stories for Business News Daily. So Jane used something specific about her skill and related it back to how she can benefit the company. Then she used the last paragraph to show how she's excited about being a part of the company and left her contact information on how the employer can contact her. Then Jane closed the note with a simple thank you and left the salutation sincerely with her name. So, in looking at this, you don't have to write a whole page, just something simple to show your gratitude, why you're the best choice for the job, and that you're looking forward to hearing back from the employer. And that concludes the contents for this presentation today. Thank you so much for joining our webinar.